Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show, the Comedy in the Kingdom Tour Edition on Bog Radio and in association with 24 Flicks. We have a special guest on the show today, one of the comedians of the Comedy in the Kingdom Tour. We've had Leland Clausen, we've had Willie Brown and Mark Christopher Lawrence and Felicia Frazier, Michelle Van Dusen. There at least 20 comedians associated with the tour, and one of those comedians are here with us. I mean, right now. We're going to bring her out right now. She has a comedy production company called X2 Comedy, where she produces clean comedy shows in her own right. You've probably seen her on the Maurice Brown Breaking Down the Four Walls show, as we get together, a bunch of comedians, and break down God's word. To say the very least, that's a lot of fun. With no further ado, let's bring her out right now from Virginia, Dawn Davis Womack. What's up, Dawn? How are you?
What is up? Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It is so good to be here. Thanks for having me, Maurice.
Well, it's great to have you on the show, Dawn. And, I was talking about X2 Comedy. You have your own, comedy production
Yes,
that you and your husband, Chris, are involved with. That's in Virginia on the East Coast.
that's right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, X2 Comedy does pop up comedy shows throughout the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. And these shows feature local, regional, and national touring comedians. So we bring comedians in from all over. And we're 5 years in business now, and we keep growing. So it's pretty exciting.
5 years in the business. I am in Austin, Texas now, and I lived in that region, Northern Virginia, right there at Washington, D.C. for like 20, 28, 29 years. May as well say 30, but a lot of comedy chops for me were built in Washington, D.C. And I find the comedy in D.C. quite challenging.
Mm.
And every time I've gone outside of DC, I've done pretty well. Like, wow, this is great. And then most of the most of the comedians from DC all say you find out that, wow, people really think you're hilarious because it's really tough. If it's tough sledding in DC
What
because you have,
how
yeah,
so? Why do you feel it's that way? Because I
I
haven't really worked up there a ton,
Yeah,
so
well, DC, they're too cerebral. It's a political town and they overthink jokes. Okay.
So are they quiet or
I,
are they
well, they're, yes, they're
okay?
trying to make sure that the punchline makes sense. Like most
Mm.
comedy shows you go to, people just want to have a good time. It's not that serious, bah, ha, 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 and it's all good. But in DC, it's like, would somebody get this guy a martini? Because anyway, here's the deal. Here's the deal, Don. They
Alright, what
overthink
is it?
they overthink jokes, and then you have a very diverse population in DC.
Mhm.
So, you got all these different ethnicities and so forth, and everybody's kind of packed in together. So, some cultures don't get it, some cultures do, yada, yada, yada. It's a lot of different elements to it. But I've been to San Diego, I've been to Miami, all over Florida, and I've certainly been here in Texas. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty easygoing.
Yeah,
And I just think Washington D.C. kind of builds comedy chops. Now that's not to say it's the same thing in Virginia. I just
right.
said that because it's so close to
It
D.C.
is close, yeah. But it's a different animal because 'cause we're in a more rural area of the country, and there wasn't really a comedy scene to speak of here when we started X2 Comedy in March 2018,
Yeah.
and that's why I started it, because I was traveling to DC and Virginia Beach and New York and a lot of other places where comedy was happening because it wasn't happening here. So we decided to start a local scene, and it's definitely grown. It's really exciting.
Yes. And as we talk about comedy and clean comedy, I am creating along with you and others, but I am chiefly and principally attempting to create a comedy in the kingdom tour
Yes.
comprised of numerous clean
Hilarious people.
uh, clean comedians, and
Yes.
the point is to get clean comedy recognized more than anything for Christ, and just show the world that yeah, there are a lot of funny people in the clean comedy world. I mean, way more than people actually realized.
I think so too.
We talked about this before.
Yeah.
Talked about this with several other comedians on prior shows, but the most lucrative comedian in the world is Jerry
Yes.
Jerry
A
Seinfeld
clean
is a
comedian.
clean comic,
Right.
and he's worth almost $1 billion. And
He's done well for himself.
he's done quite well for himself. Oh, by the way, but I'm just saying that the profane comics aren't even close to him. Dave
Yeah.
Chappelle and Kevin Hart and those guys, they're not close. I've looked at the numbers, and they're like, you know, $4 or $5 million off. Not that I wouldn't take their check, by the way, but
I
I'm
would take it too, while we're just putting that out there.
just saying. But it's amazing though. It's like, man, people, I think clean comedy requires you to write better, to think harder, and as a result, you're going to give better material to your audience.
Right.
And everyone can resonate with the humor. You can
Mhm.
do it and from, 8 years old to 80, literally, and everybody's going to generally be able to vibe with you.
Mhm.
And so the Comedy in the Kingdom tour, like I said, there's so many comedians. You were at the LOLGCA conference in
Yes.
Triangle, Virginia, which is a comedy conference held by Roxanne David,
Right.
aka Miss Clarice.
Yes.
That's her comedy name, but in real life, she's Roxanne David. Before she
That's
goes into
right.
the telephone booth, she's Roxanne David.
Yep.
Well, she's grandma to LOLGC.
She
Tell,
is.
tell us a little bit about your experience down there and some of the comedians you ran into.
We ran into Willie Brown and Shanita Morris, Fifi Frazier,
Yeah,
June Colson, Leyland Clayson. I think I said that
Leland
right.
Clausen. Yes.
Clausen. He's wonderful. I definitely need to get that pronunciation down.
Yes.
Joey ILO, Christian
Yeah.
McCartney, several heavy hitters, just amazing talent. And they had a showcase that was incredible, hilarious. And then they did an award ceremony and sprinkled in stand up comedy performances between giving away awards on the final night, which was also hilarious.
So you have, as we mentioned, the X2 Comedy Productions in Virginia, and you guys perform in what you call a cave. It's kind of
It's
an
one of our
interesting
venues, yes.
interesting experience. But folks, we're we're going to give you an opportunity to listen to Don Davis Womack doing her thing.
I have been on a mental health journey for the last few years, and now I have so many therapists. I call them Heal Team 6.
Well, still Team 6.
Heal
Okay.
team. Heal team 6 instead of
Yeah, I
heal
can.
team.
I can go that. Listen, you know what? It's really interesting you mentioned therapy because we're living in a time now in 2023 where our therapist needs a therapist.
Yes,
I
correct.
see. And that's not a joke. Anyway,
Mm-mm.
but the thing is, Don, that is funny because it's kind of encapsulates 2023.
It does.
I mean, people are going through some stuff,
Yes.
and it does. I mean, and in young people, for goodness sakes,
Right.
or
Depression is skyrocketed, and unfortunately, suicide has too,
yeah.
which is very difficult for the persons obviously going through that to make that choice, but their families too that are left behind.
Well, as you say that, and I totally agree, and I was going to kind of get into that a little bit later because I wanted to play a trailer by Donnie Stopa that
Mm.
talks about cancel culture. Now, of
Mhm.
course, obviously, what we're discussing is not necessarily that. You made a joke which was very funny about therapy,
Mhm.
and there are people out there that would get mad. I think it's funny, but there are people out there that would overreact in the culture that we live in now
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
misread and misunderstand. Hey, this is just a joke. And oh, by the way, and I'm just saying hypothetically, I see a therapist. I mean, this
Mhm.
is just a joke. So
Yeah.
just relax. Understand where you are right now.
And
Okay.
I'm speaking about my experience, not your experience. And people that overreact to, we don't know where they are on their journey and what they're going through. Because when our emotions are running high or we have unresolved trauma, we can tend to react rather than respond.
Exactly. And I,
Mhm.
and I think that it opens up a can of worms when you talk about what is going on in our society today. It's just far as just regular joke telling. I mean, there
Mhm.
was the we can go back to the Oscars a couple of years ago where Will Smith slapped Chris Rock and he made this innocent joke about his wife and being GI Jane. Everybody got it, and most people can take a joke. But now in this society, not only did she get upset, Will went up on stage and did something that's never been done in television and
Mhm.
slapped the host of the Oscars while he's
Right.
doing a comedy
That would
routine.
be a reaction.
And so you
Yes.
that would be a reaction.
That would be
Right.
definitely a reaction. Yes.
That's no question about it. As Bill Murray said in the movie Stripes, they're putting schnitzel in the schnauzer. Anyway, no, Hey, you're exactly right. You're exactly right, and I just think that it's difficult. And I'm kind of jumping ahead with some of my questions because I think it's difficult for a clean comedian more than even a profane comedian in some respects to tell an innocent joke without someone getting mad. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's such an interesting thought. Perhaps. I don't know if I've exactly experienced that though in my performances that I can recall, but I do see it. I see what you're saying out in the etherverse or the Facebook averse or the Instagram averse. I do see that. The
Well,
YouTube
anyway,
averse.
it so we're talking about just how difficult it can be for any comedian, really. It doesn't matter if you're funny or
Right.
not. Our good friend Donnie the Entertainer Stopa has a documentary that will be released soon. He's going through some contractual agreements and finalizations of getting that done on a certain platform that we won't mention here. And it will be released, and we can all really dissect where he's coming from. But it's called Comedy versus Cancel
Oh,
Culture.
that's interesting.
We're talking about censorship in comedy. Do you think that cancel culture exists in comedy?
Basically, in a nutshell,
Definitely feel like, as bizarre as it sounds, like there's a war on jokes right now.
Cancel culture, it's such a misdirected umbrella term. You can't police what is subjective.
oh wow! Like you kind of have to live your life bulletproof now. You just have to.
Greatest night in the history of television.
You can't say an inappropriate joke that doesn't have the right context.
There's always going to be some sliver of cancel culture, of woke, of political correctness.
You're not funny, and this is how you have to do the joke, because I know how funny jokes work. That's not the joke.
I don't believe people get canceled. I believe that they have a shift in their audience.
Put your hands together for Mr. Joe Rogan!
When people say somebody is canceled, I think it just means, oh, we found they did or said something that most people don't like.
I date a lot of bimbos. That's the problem, man.
So what?
So let's think about that joke in today's culture.
Well, now, why don't we just think about that? And I think, Joe Rogan, by the way, was in that trailer, and I'm in Austin, Texas right now. He just opened up a club about 4 or 5 months ago in Austin, and it's all the rage to get into Joe Rogan's club. And when he opened
The
up
mothership, right?
the mothership, and when he first opened, you had to have an invitation to go into the club.
Wow.
You had to be invited by Joe. Now he's loosened things up a little bit. I think you can go over there. I'd love to perform over there. Hopefully before the year's out, I'd like to be able to perform over there, but he's loosened things up. But it's all the rage, and he was part of that trailer. I just thought I'd mention that. But Chris Rock made the statement, "It's the greatest night in the history of television," after Chris slapped him. I'm like, well, I don't know if I would say the greatest night, but I'll tell you this, Don, no one's ever going to forget it.
No.
No one's ever going to forget that. But I think comedy versus the cancel culture is the issue that comedians, whether you're clean or profane, are dealing with in 2023. Would you not agree?
I do see that. I wonder if it's obviously the material, but specific material that is causing the reactions for people that have what they say woke ideology or leftist ideology.
Well, I did a show before COVID, and I was paid to do this big show, and I told a joke about an incident my wife had on the interstate, which involved a man in a fishnet shirt. Now, I made the joke. I forget all the particulars. I haven't told the joke again, but everybody liked it. But the booker came onto the stage and said, "I need for you to apologize." She whispered to me, and I need for you to apologize because you just offended my nephew. He's gay. And I went, "Oh, this is the middle of my set."
In the middle of your set?
In the middle of my set.
Now,
She does this.
what was the infraction?
The infraction was I was poking fun at gay people. But that wasn't what the joke was about. But it did involve someone in a fishnet shirt, and her nephew happened to be wearing one.
I see.
So all of a sudden, I'm a gay basher.
I see.
And that wasn't the point. So I apologized anyway, because check was pretty good. Anyway, I'm just kind of I apologize.
Check was pretty good. Sure, whatever you say.
Sure, whatever you say. Anyway, I apologized. And then after the show, the audience was like, "You shouldn't have apologized. That was hilarious. And, sir, who wears a fishnet shirt to a comedy show and expects not to be bothered?"
Right. You're standing out, which brings attention.
And so, anyway, that being said, I've experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
Where I stepped on someone's toes, and it couldn't have been more innocent.
Yeah.
And we're just kind of in that culture now where you better be careful what you joke about. And if you go there, you better make sure you handle it right.
I think in today's society, anybody can offend anybody.
Yes. That's the culture we're living in right now.
Yeah. It doesn't take much.
It doesn't take
these
much
days
at
to be
all.
offended.
It's utterly amazing. I think it makes their job a whole lot more difficult. As comedians, we don't care because we love challenges, and we're going to go out there and do whatever we think is funny anyway. I'm one of those people. Like, I have to learn the hard way that, no, really, no, Maurice, no, really, you shouldn't. Anyway, but that's how we're wired.
Right.
We just go, man, that's funny to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that you're hoping against hope sometimes that the audience will see the humor in the joke. Like, this is funny. but you will offend more than not when you go to those kind of corridors where it's dicey. I
Mhm.
mentioned Richard Pryor, I mentioned Eddie Murphy and George Carlin and some others from back in the day who crossed all kind of lines. Red Fox
Mhm.
and so forth. There was the Archie Bunker show, All in the Family, talked about every ethnicity.
Mm.
No one got upset. Those shows were not canceled, by the way. They were some of the most popular shows in television history and some of the most popular comedians in
Mhm.
stand-up history.
Mhm.
Richard Pryor, for my money, is probably the funniest to ever get on a stage. But no one got upset about that stuff. But today, they do. And I think Dave Chappelle, I mentioned Jerry Seinfeld being the most lucrative, but I think the hottest comic out there, like must see stand up right now, correct me if I'm wrong, is probably Dave Chappelle.
That's probably accurate.
Okay.
There's a lot of great heavy hitters out there right now, but yes.
There are, but there are not many doing Netflix specials for $20 million a pop.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so
I'm not in that group just yet.
let me see. Hold on. Wait a minute. Wait, hold on, Don. Wait. Oh, no, me either. Here's the thing. When you look at Dave and the trouble he got in on one of those Netflix specials, it kind of opened up the door for other comedians to be chastised about certain subject matter. But the bottom line is, Don, clearly you have not had to grapple with that during your time or
So
tenure
far,
on
knock
stage.
on wood, I'm sitting at a wood table.
Yeah. And I've been doing it myself for about 12 years, and I've had some interesting experiences with subject matter, what's funny, what's not funny, and I'm talking about in a Christian environment.
Mhm.
Like I could get away with some of these jokes, and it would still be considered clean in a club.
That's correct. Yes.
But here in this Christian environment, it's kind of where the veils come on.
And isn't that a different kind of cancel culture?
Isn't it now?
Yep.
It really is.
It is. I did now on that note, I did a gig at let's say ultra conservative
Okay.
community. I knew it was conservative, but I didn't know it was that ultra conservative. And I had a wine joke.
Okay.
And that did not sit well with, I would say, a minority group of people in that room,
Yeah.
but it came back to me. And that person didn't come to me direct. It came through the back door, which is also something to challenge our Christian friends with is if you have a conflict with someone, you need to go to them direct.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, some of the best wine you'll ever taste is in church during communion at some.
That's right.
I'm just saying. Anyway, Don, that it's the interesting thing about your comment on just being, judged or scrutinized because of the joke you told in a church setting. That's another level.
Oh, it was a barn setting, but church group. Anyway, go ahead.
A church group, just
Yeah.
a different concept. And so now you're dealing with how people are going to perceive your joke and so forth. So, but I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. You have a very interesting start in the comedy world as you began your stand-up comedy career. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, the Cliff Note version is I wanted to be a Hollywood actress, and I started out as a theater major at West Virginia University. And my father died tragically. So I changed course and got an undergraduate and graduate degree in exercise science because that makes all the sense in the world. And 20 years passed, and I was mentoring a JMU student here at James Madison University. And 3 weeks into our relationship, I hadn't really shared that with many people about leaving theater for that reason. And she said, "You seem to be all about people chasing their dreams, except the only problem is you stopped chasing yours."
Wow.
Yeah.
What a statement.
It was. And then there was much crying on my husband's shoulder that evening because I am in rural Virginia, 2.5 hours south of DC. There was not a comedy scene here. And I
Yeah.
was even thinking about stand-up comedy then. I was thinking acting.
Yeah.
And so I'm not, why start now? And from here, what are you, crazy? So fast forward 5 years after that, I found myself doing comedic film acting, and then asked myself, what is the one thing that scares you the most that will make you a better comedic actor? And hands down, that was stand up. But I was
How about it?
scared. I was scared out of my mind, as outgoing and having no problem being in front of a group of people. Just the stand up itself was intimidating to me. So
Yeah.
I took a class to face my fear. And at the graduation showcase, a producer was in the show, came up to me after the show and said, "You're hilarious. I want to put you on a paid show and I will pay you."
Amazing.
Yeah.
I
That
think
started.
well, being a stand-up comedian is the most, I think, fearful thing for the average human being to ever attempt. I mean, public speaking is bad enough.
Yeah.
Right.
I felt much more comfortable doing that. It's odd. Yeah.
Now, not only do you have to be a public speaker,
Yes.
you have to be the life of the party.
Yes.
With a room full of strangers that you've never met before, most of the time.
Right.
And most of which you probably wouldn't have a conversation with in front of a Walmart. But right now, I'm going to make each and every one of you, whether it's 100 or 1,000, my bestest buddy for the next 60 minutes or however long you're
I
going to be on.
know. I think I was thinking, I know my friends think I'm funny, but I just make people laugh. I don't understand structure of joke. I don't get. That's where I was, and that's why I was so petrified. I think it was just not lack of knowledge is probably the best way to put it.
Well, see, it's one thing to be funny. It's another thing to know how
Yeah,
to be
that was
funny.
it. It was knowledge of how. Like
It's all about
structurally.
how do you do this?
Yeah, because it's different if you're hanging out with your friends, you've got more time, they've known you a lot longer, you got context with that person, you can tell a story and embellish it. I just knew innately stand-up was completely different. And that was what was most intimidating then.
Don Rickles used to talk about a close comedy friend of his that was absolutely hilarious in a social setting.
Mhm.
They're sitting at the table, a bunch of comics. He was a riot.
Yes.
When he got on stage, everyone was like, he's not funny. So it didn't. He's
got
one
funny.
of those. He's just not funny. The words of Don Rickles. He just didn't have it.
Yeah.
So the reality, the reality is, stand-up comedy is a skill, and it's a learned skill.
Yes.
And so you can have comedy ability, but to get up
Yes.
there on that stage, that's a skill.
Absolutely.
And that's only one that's attained after pain and suffering.
Yes.
Meaning you have to bomb. You have
Yes.
to allow yourself to be thick-skinned enough to weather failures, to start putting the whole thing together and go, okay, this way, okay, pacing, setup, punch,
Yep.
all of that stuff. There's so many factors.
Callbacks, word economy.
Yeah, word economy, all of that
Punch
stuff, you know.
ups. Yeah, tags. Yeah.
How many words will make this bomb go off? And I mean the good bomb.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, so it's a part of the game. I love what you're saying. I had my start in the 90s. I was a radio announcer. My manager said, "I think you're really funny. You should do stand-up." And he told me
That's
where
what
I
he
could
told
do
you.
it. Charlie Goodnight's in Raleigh, North Carolina. I went over there. I went up against 25 or more comedians. They only picked 4. I was one of the 4. Never done it before in my life. I was one of the 4, and I got out there just as nervous as a wet cat.
It happens.
I was like, I was at North Carolina State University, and he had all these drunk college kids hanging on the balcony. The stage was in the middle of all these crazy college kids, and I was just overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I did my set, but it didn't do it like it did in the audition.
Right.
You know, I killed in the audition, but when it was go time, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't believe I'm doing this. So yeah, it's a very humbling
Yes.
experience, stand-up comedy.
It is. And 2 thoughts come to mind. The first one is whenever you ask somebody ahead of you as a stand-up comic what advice they will give you, what do they say most often than not? They say 2 words and they repeat it a lot of times. And those
Yeah.
2 words are stage time, stage time, stage time, stage
Yes.
time, stage time.
Yes. Yeah, Leland Clausen and I were just talking about that last night. That is the key to getting better. And he said bad experiences are actually good experiences as well because you were on stage and you
Right.
learned something through that bad experience.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's stage time, stage time. There's no question about it. And so, you know, I think once you've got, I was talking to Kim Curley, who's also a part of our tour.
Mhm.
And she said that she's gotten to the point now where, because she didn't like to go to open mics, and I kind of don't like going anymore either because now everybody's a comedian. It used before COVID, there was only about 12, 15
They
people
have
at
gone
mics.
up, haven't they? They've gone up here in
Oh,
our
no.
rural area as well. Yeah.
Every mic I've gone to since COVID, there's been at least 40 to 50 comedians there. And
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
I'm not staying here all night. I'm not doing
Mhm.
that. If I can't be in the first 10, I'm gone. I'm too old for this. I leave it to the young guys to stay up until 3:00 in the morning. Anyway, so no, I just think that you've got to get that stage time. But Kim Curley was saying that she's done it so many times, she's just, you know, going to rely now on just the I forget the word or the term she used, but she's been on stage so many times, she's comfortable with not going to the mics. And I kind of feel the same way, sort of. But when Leland, who's awesome,
He's
Leland
amazing.
Clausen,
He performed
he's
at
amazing.
the LOL GCA too. It was great.
And Leland said that, I went, yeah, you've got to get your reps in. You've got to get your reps in. So I'll say this real quick. George Carlin, who's one of the best ever. I mean, you could pick George Carlin or Richard Pryor, take your pick. He was awesome. But George Carlin had to do a series of HBO specials because he was in trouble with the IRS.
Mm.
What George Carlin did was he wrote out an hour set to his own liking. And when he was satisfied, he'd go out and kill. He wasn't worried as much. Of course, he grew up, you know, the son of actors and vaudevillians.
Mm-hmm.
So he was always around the stage. So it may have had something to do with it. But by and large, it is stage time, stage time, stage time. As I say that, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show, Comedy in the Kingdom Tour Show with comedian Don Davis Womack on Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks. And as Don and I rattle on about comedy, Don, let me ask you this. 2023, what is your opinion of the state of stand-up comedy, its health? How do people view it? Is it like the thing now, or has it regressed since COVID? How do people feel about stand-up comedy in 2023?
I think more people are interested in stand-up comedy in general.
Okay.
Then I also see some trends that are very interesting. For example, because of social media, you have a bunch of stand-up comics out there that are putting out crowd work clips and they're short
Yeah.
clips and they're going viral, which is a benefit to the comic because crowd work is instantaneous and in the moment. It's not part of your crafted set that you have prepared if that's what you're going to do, unless you're
Yeah.
straight up crowd work comic. And so you don't burn your material when you're putting your crowd work clips out there. It's
Yeah.
smart. But then it's also creating for people that don't have a lot of background watching shows as an audience member. And this is their first introduction to comedy where the person presents themselves as a stand up comic. So their first impression is these crowd work clips, which you would deduce logically, then that's the way it works. So a trend that we're seeing, because I produce a lot of shows, is we have chattier audiences with us
Yes, we do.
without us even initiating the connection. Some of them yell out stuff. It's very what's comforting to me and encouraging and hopeful about it is it's very jovial in general. It's not from a mean spirit. It feels like they want to connect more. The audiences
Yes.
want to connect more with the artist. So people are looking for more experiences right now.
Yes.
So what does the next evolution of stand-up comedy look like? I see people that are leading in that area, and they're not. I'd love to watch some more Christian comics because I'm sure they're out there too. But some secular comics that are doing something so different, but yet mastering the craft is Casey Rocket, and he's in Austin.
Okay.
He's a doorman for the mothership. And
Okay.
if you YouTube this young comic, the very first time you look at this comic perform, you're going to say, "Is he on something? Is he crazy? What am I watching right now?"
Yeah, no, I've seen Casey Rocket. I did a mic with him
Okay.
a few months ago, and I'm going to tell you he's hilarious.
But it's so different, is it not?
I love that kid. He's really
Right?
good. He's a breath of fresh air because in the midst of all these young comics now that you see at the mic, every now and then you'll see a real gem.
Yes.
And he's got this different approach. I mean,
Different
he's
approach.
like beside himself. He can't get still. He can't
No.
stand in one place. He's stepping over chairs and doing.
He's gonna
He's
Blair Witch this
hilarious. Oh, yeah, I love that kid.
If you watch him perform over and over again, and I've said this to comics around here, you watch him over again. If you study comedy and you're a stand-up comic, you watch that and you go, "Oh my gosh, this guy's playing 4D chess. What are we gonna do?" So
Yes.
it's intimidating and exciting at the same time. When I
love it.
see his influence, or he's having an influence on opening up comics creativity. I'm seeing comics getting more creative.
Yeah. Well, this particular young man is quite creative.
Oh, yes.
He definitely, is one to watch down the road.
Yeah.
He's gonna make it.
Oh, yeah.
But there are different styles out there, without question. I think stand-up comedy is pretty hot. I think that people are loving stand-up maybe about as much as they've ever loved it,
Yeah.
particularly after COVID, because people
Yeah.
want, that release. They want to be able to just, relax and have a good time. And stand-up comedy definitely gives you that way. And people are chattier and they're not heckling. They're just excited.
No.
And they
Yes.
want to help. And if you give them their 15 seconds of fame once or twice, they'll actually kind of chill out
Yeah.
and stop doing that.
It's different, but I kind of like it.
Yeah. It doesn't. It doesn't bother you. You understand that they're just excited. There are some comics that won't tolerate it, and you have the chattiness can be misinterpreted by, there are comics that will destroy you if you interrupt their set. And
different
they don't
styles.
really stop to analyze whether or not you were helping. You interrupted me. I'm not saying that I agree. Matter of fact, I think I think it's mean. Like,
Yes.
give the person a chance, give yourself a chance to read this individual to see whether or not they deserve the lambasting you're about to deliver. Because I've seen some people get lambasted.
I have
For
to.
having the gall to interrupt someone, and actually some of them deserved it because they were genuine hecklers. But I'm
Yeah.
just saying to you, most people are not.
Right. Let's
So
go on. Did you see, Chris? Speaking of Christian comics, though, that seem to be engaging with the audience and rolling with the punches, and with this new trend, is John Chris's latest special.
I have not seen it. No.
Oh, so great! It's great, and so I think it's the best John Chris I've ever seen.
Well, and John
Yes.
Christ, we were talking about pain and suffering and bad experiences.
Yeah.
John Christ
He's been
was
through it.
a big name in Christian comedy, and then he took a
Absolutely.
fall.
It happens.
John Christ got into this situation with some females on the road. I'm sure he wouldn't mind us talking about it because it's well documented.
He's
He'll
already
talk
talked
about it
about
openly
it.
himself. And his career just went in the tank.
Well, he
And
needed to heal.
What's that?
He needed to heal. He needed
He needed to heal. He
Yep.
had to get counseling. He had to
Yep.
get therapy and
Yep.
all those different things. And he resurrected his
Yes.
career. He's better now than he was before.
Yes. It's so fun, and he's very authentic.
He's
and
very
real.
authentic. He's a joker. He's a
Yeah.
flat out jokester. He
Yeah.
can't help himself. But again,
He's
getting
talking
back
about real
to
stuff and poking fun at it. It's really great. So
yes,
check it out.
and ladies and gentlemen, I highly advise you to go out and find John Christ. And I think the last name is spelled Christ, correct, John?
That's correct.
John Christ. Go out and find him on YouTube. Where platform of whether it's a podcast or what have you, find John Christ and check him out. The guy is absolutely hilarious. We're talking with Don Davis Womack on the Maurice Brown Comedy Show on Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks. And we are talking about comedy and also the Comedy in the Kingdom tour, which we are going to try to bring to you in the summer of 2024. Don, we were talking about heckling and so forth. What's the biggest thing, talking about pain and suffering and going through difficult experiences, what's the biggest thing that you've learned on that stand-up comedy stage that has made you better at it, took your comedy game to another level? What is it that you've learned that made you better at comedy?
Oh, wow. How much time do you have, Maurice? It has been healing for me and challenging. Oh, what is the biggest thing I'm like? I think learning and being patient with the fact that it takes time to find your true comedic voice.
Okay.
And it is okay.
Yes.
So we don't have to compare ourselves to other stand-ups, see their pictures on social media, and get into a comparison game of where we're not because of where they are.
Yes.
And relax and be yourself, because the sooner you do that, the quicker you're going to find it.
Yes. Well, I think that, and there are so many things about
There's so
comedy
many
that you can learn and that can take your game to the next level.
What
Because,
about you? That's what I'm going to ask you. What do you think?
well, I
What's for you?
think for me, I just think the bombings that I experienced early in my start, I probably went out of a 12-year career. I went about a year and a half where I just bombed consistently.
Mm.
And I didn't know how to really write a joke
Mm.
and write it in such a way where people would actually get it, because it's all about not only writing, then you have to understand the mechanics of a joke and the
Yes.
setup and then the punch and how
Mhm.
you're pacing it and how you're getting them heading in one direction and then bam, you go that direction.
It's
All these
correct.
different things that you
Yeah.
just kind of learn about comedy. And so I learned it through the bombings.
Mm.
And I did a show in a Christian environment once where I knew that I had actually arrived to the point where it's like, oh, this is something I'm never going to stop doing. I
Mm.
told a joke in a Christian environment that didn't go over well. And up to that point, I was killing. And people were taking pictures and everything. I had them in the palm of my hand. There was a joke I wanted to tell. And it bombed. It didn't go over well.
Mhm.
I just fell flat on my face. I mean, I couldn't recover from it.
Mm.
And I was the headlining comedian
Oh
that
my gosh. No,
and yeah,
Maurice.
yes, and I couldn't recover from it. And I thought, wow,
Oh
I
no.
I actually didn't read the room.
Mm.
And my son had tried to tell me, because I bounced jokes off my family on the way to the show. And my oldest son was like, but Dad, I wouldn't tell that one. I don't think this crowd will get that joke. I wouldn't tell it. And again, being, the kind of comedian that I am, and I think most comedians are, we can't help ourselves. We push boundaries. We
Mhm.
just do. If we want to see if I can take it to the next level, we just got to know. And that's the kind of comic I am. I felt like had I landed that one, I would have been like the king in that area. I was just really killing. And the
Mhm.
joke was not for that crowd.
Oh, jeez.
It just wasn't. And so I learned,
Oh.
but what I learned was,
Yeah.
hey, Don, what I learned was, part of the game. I'll just come back tomorrow. We'll go get them again.
Yep.
It
All the
just didn't
greats
affect
would
me.
say that too.
It just
Yeah.
didn't affect me. I
Mhm.
felt more upset for my wife and kids, because they're not comics. They don't have to shake it off. It's like, what did you do that for? Anyway,
Shake it off. Shake it off.
but anyway, that's what I
Sometimes it take
learned.
a long time to shake it off.
Hey, Don. But what I learned was that, I have the thick skin enough to understand. Yeah, you go back to the drawing board on that one and understand who your audience is.
Mhm.
You got to know who your audience is, and to put your jokes in the categories that they need to be in. Read the room, for goodness sake.
Mhm.
So that was, I think, the biggest turning point for me, because up to that point, I was already starting to do well consistently on stage.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then you start getting a big head and you think you can do almost anything.
Mhm.
And I had to, come back down to earth and go,
It feels like
yeah, no.
it feels like it happens. I want to say every comic. You just have that early success and you think, wow, I'm ready for my first Netflix special.
Oh my goodness gracious. I mean, that's
You're
all I
not.
was thinking. I really felt
Oh,
like I'm heading towards that. And
yeah.
God's gotta go, whoa there, cowboy.
You,
Let's
it,
slow.
they tend to think, and me included, when you're early on, you think you can do more than you really are ready for.
Yes. I had a friend that took a gig in Vegas, a 45-minute headlining spot in Vegas. He wasn't near ready. And he took it and went out there and bombed.
Oh my gosh. Of
And,
course.
and he, what was so bad about that was he put himself in a very visible position, in front of some big names and all that. And he wasn't near ready.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
now, not only did you bomb, and you definitely learned something from that one,
Yes. The
but
hard way.
there are a lot of people there in the business that will not forget you bombing,
Mhm.
which he'll have to manufacture through all of that as well.
Mhm.
which didn't have to happen. So there are people that think they're better than they are. A lot of comedians think they're really good when they're really not. You think you've got 40 minutes of good stuff, and you maybe have 5.
Yeah,
You
I've
may, hey
heard that.
Don, you
You
maybe
figure it
have
out.
5.
Yes. Did you
You know.
you figured it out? So I think the craft has a method to its own madness.
You can talk for 40 minutes, but save that for a lecture at LSU.
Or to your husband.
Or to your husband. Well, look,
that was a joke.
Of course,
People
Don,
listening.
of course, that was a joke. But anyway, those are the basics of comedy, the things that you can go through, and obviously you get better. Now we're going to get out of here, Don, but I want to ask you before we do, what advice can you leave with a young comedian out there that wants to make a career and go of it clean?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, surround yourself with comics that do work clean.
Yeah.
So that they can give you some advice and counsel. You can bounce questions off them, especially if you're going to go move into open mics or in secular environments. You're going to run into things where people have a different idea of what clean is or isn't, and what is that for you, and what is your boundary with that. So I think the advice and being around people that are on a similar path ahead of you is the best advice I can give, because you can have mentorship that way to help bring you up so that you can excel being a clean comedian.
Great advice, Don. Great advice. And what does Don Davis Womack and X2 Comedy have coming up on the horizon?
Oh, well, we have next Laugh for the Arts at Court Square Theater on October 28th. And this is the fundraiser to raise funds for new equipment and upgrades that the theater desperately needs. Is a nonprofit theater that serves our community. And then right after that, the next thing is our graduation showcase for our newest X2 comedy class students who just started last night.
Okay.
So their graduation showcase is coming up in 4 weeks. And that's most of what I'm doing, with some business meetings behind the scenes as a producer. And we are soon going to be introducing comedy and wine experiences where you can have stand-up comedy mixed with wine education.
Well, there it is. And I'm sure the Holy Catholic and Episcopal Church would applaud you.
Right,
Now,
that's my background.
So, Don,
Catholic.
So Don, and with that being said, how can fans follow you on social media or by website?
Oh, I have so many things for you, laughers. I'm gonna make it super easy.
Here's some of the ways right here.
I'm not on Twitter. Well, I am on Twitter, but I don't use it.
Okay.
Anyways,
yes.
The Funny Womacks on Instagram and Facebook. Womacks, WOM as a mom, ACKS. And then thefunnywomacks.com. You heard me what I said. And then x2comedy.com.
Yeah.
And we're on Facebook and Instagram as X2 Comedy.
Awesome. Don, thank you so much for being on the show. You're listening to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show, Comedy in the Kingdom edition on Bog Radio, with one of the members of the tour coming your way summer of 2024, Don Davis Womack. And not only are we on Bog Radio, this is also in courtesy of KCHF TV in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we're heard every Saturday night there at midnight and again at 8 p.m. And also you can listen to this interview where all major podcasts are heard. Spotify, my gosh, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Radiocast, Pocket Cast, you name it. We are there. I keep thinking about the kid, Casey Rockets. That kid, he's like walking around. He's like walking around having a composed meltdown. It's like he just can't get still.
You gotta get trapped.
He's like, he's awesome. Look up Casey Rockets. The kid's hilarious. But Don, thank you so much once again for being on the show. And we got to have Chris up here, your husband, one of these days. He's a very good stand-up comic as well. But thank you. We might have to get.
Oh, and
get him
Casey
on the
Rocket, I
show.
don't know if he would ever listen to this, but Casey Rocket, I want a picture of Grimace on the Berlin Wall.
Okay. Well, you know what? First of all, I think it would be good for Casey to listen to this, and it would be great if he could do that for you. Don, thank you so much once again, and may the peace of Jesus Christ be with you and your family. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you.